Hello everyone, welcome back. Razirek here, and today we're going to be looking at part 2 of my solid modeling tutorial. If you haven't been following along the series, in part 1, my last video, we went in depth with what solid modeling is. For those of you familiar with other modeling engines, you may also know it as CSG, Constructive Solid Geometry. And it's basically a way of joining two parts together to either add or subtract parts from the piece that you're working with and create a much more complex shape. So today I'm going to kind of get away from the more in-depth look that I took in the previous video where I covered what it is and some of the pitfalls that you may run into and how to really use it and things like that. And today I'm going to just build a couple of things to give you guys an idea, some of the stuff that can be done, and give you a few tips and shortcuts that I think you'll be able to apply to a lot of different builds and get you thinking about different ways to create your models that you may not have previously thought of. So I'm going to try to keep this brief, but let's go ahead and get started. I'm just going to create a few very basic models here using this technique and just kind of get some creative juices flowing. But we're going to start with a cylinder. And we're going to rotate this so that it's standing on its end, and we'll grab that and drag it onto our base plate here. And I'm going to come down here just for simplicity's sake, and I'm going to increase the size to 4 by 3 by 3. And actually, you know what, that's a little bit taller than I want it to be, so I'm going to bring this on down. That works right there. So now with that being done, I'm going to duplicate this shape, and I'm going to bring this down to half a stud. And I'm going to hold Shift and Command on my Mac. For you Windows users, it would be Shift and Control. I'm going to grab one of these handles, and whoop, it's not resizing the way that I'm looking for it to. Interesting. There we go. Okay, for some reason, I think I may have a sticky key or something like that. It was not resizing from the center, but it looks like it's behaving now. So I just resized this down half a stud like this, and now I'm going to raise this up so you can see. So this is our cutaway shape here. And now if I go ahead and negate this and then join through union, you'll see that we're left with our hollow shape. But I'm going to take it a step further this time because we did a lot of this in the last video. I'm going to show you some little tricks and shortcuts that you can use here to kind of build some things and not struggle so much with positioning and all of that. I'm actually going to undo a couple of times here. There we are. And actually that thickness was a little bit wider than I want. I'm going to bring this down to 0.25 before I continue further. And let's go ahead and do our resize again. It's doing it again. There we are. Okay. And raise it up. Now, before I negate this, I'm going to duplicate this part. And now I'm going to do my negate. Okay? I'm going to go back to the part that I had duplicated, and you can tell from the bounding box which one has been selected. So this is my duplicate here. All right. With that being selected, I'm going to call this fill, just so we can find it later. Okay. So now I have a part that's ready to be cut out of my cylinder. So I'm going to create that union. So we have the cutout. And I'm going to go back to my fill. And I'm going to bring this down to about here. And let's come over here and choose, how about pastel light blue? Let's give this a transparency value of 0.4. Then we can come back to our union. Now, remember from before, we have this use part color property here. I'm going to check this, and let's pick a brown color here. And we can even say maybe wood planks. I think that looks pretty cool. And so what we have now is, in just a matter of seconds, a wooden bucket with water inside it. Very, very quick, very simple. Uh, don't have to play around with resizing things, positioning them exactly the way they need to be. Just by duplicating that inner part before we negated, we're able to get a perfect fill area here of our centerpiece. And one thing that you're going to want to make sure of if you're doing something like this, on the bucket, you obviously don't want the player to be able to run straight through, so we want to make sure Can Collide is turned on for that one. But on the fill, because this is a water, right, we're not dealing with ice, we're going to turn that off. And what that is going to allow us to do, let's say this was large enough for the player to fit inside of, and in fact I can show you that. Let's go ahead and grab these. We're going to group them, we're going to anchor them, and now let's go ahead and resize. Yeah, I'm going to bring this up one stud here. Let's resize like that, and let's hop in here and take a look. So here we have our bucket. You can see the sides are stopping us from running through it, but we can jump inside of it. And so you've created, in this case, it's almost like a little tall bathtub maybe, but just to kind of demonstrate the way that that can collide property works. So our edges here we cannot run through, but the inner layer is something that we're able to walk right through and it not be affected by us. So there is that. I'm going to go ahead and back out. I'm going to undo this, and we can actually go a step further with this. So now let's go ahead and duplicate our union here. Oops, duplicate the union, and we're going to bring this up. Let's rotate it on its side. And now what I'm going to do, and actually I'm going to move this even further out of the way just so we can see. Let's change the appearance here. Let's go plastic, and how about gray? I'm going to duplicate this again. Now I'm going to separate these parts because I don't need this negative part at all. So we're going to delete this. And the remaining part, the remaining cylinder here, I'm going to change this to a block. So now we're positioned just above the cylinder, same dimensions as the cylinder, which is exactly what we're looking for. And now again, collisions is turned off. I always build with this off so that way we can move our parts through each other. I'm going to bring this down, and we're going to align this halfway up. And so for that, I'm going to need to adjust my snapping here by half a stud. So there we are. Now I'm going to negate this part. I'm going to duplicate it again. I'm going to bring it over this way and up. And that's actually a little bit thicker than I want it, so I'm going to bring this to 0.25. Bring it over. There we are. So that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to go ahead and select, because we're in a model here, sorry. Let's grab this union and these two parts, and let's union those. Now we can bring this on down to our bucket. And there we have a handle. Now you can adjust this before you do the union and raise this up a little bit, make it a little bit more elongated, but I think this works pretty well. It's part of our union, or part of our model, I'm sorry. So we now have a very simple, very easy to recreate bucket filled with water. So just an example of how powerful this method is in creating some unique parts that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do with the primitives here. Um, very, very simple once you understand the basics of how to go about doing this. And we can create a few more things here. Let's come over here and let's drop a wedge. And I'm going to grab my scale tool. Let's bring this back up to one stud. Let's drag this out, make it a little bit taller. That'll work right there. I'm going to make this yellow. Whitish yellow. Let's go with that color. This pastel yellow looks pretty good. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a cylinder. Rotate it on its side. Ooh, bad camera angle. There we are. And now I'm going to come over here and let's start right here. I'm going to negate this. Let's make a few duplicates of it. I'm going to rotate this back on its side again. Like this. Duplicate again. Let's rotate it back. I'm just kind of randomly doing this here. Bear with me for a moment. I'm going to scale this. Now because we've negated this, it is being treated as a union. So scaling is going to be uniform. Be mindful of that. Let's scale this down again actually. This one's a little bit too big. Let's scale this as well. There we are. Duplicate one more time here. It's over this way. This is not going to be perfect by any means. This is really just a quickie job here. Really just want to give you guys some ideas on stuff that you can do with it here, so don't expect perfection on this. I'm actually going to take off negate and scale this down because it's not as tall as we need it to be. There we are. Now negate it again. Select everything, union. Okay, now this message here you may get once in a while. There's a few things that will cause this. So there is a version 2 of CSG that does a little bit of a better job of avoiding this error. And for those of you who are curious, if you go to File and then Settings, I believe it's actually in Studio if I'm not mistaken, there is a property. Maybe it's in rendering. I'm actually not able to find it at the moment. Here it is. Okay, so it's under physics. The CSG v2. So Roblox is actually working on fixing some of the issues with their CSG processes that they apply here. They have a version 2, which is promising to help correct some of those things. but it does have a lot of its own bugs currently that they need to fix, so that's why this is disabled at the moment. Um, but while we're waiting for that, one thing that you need to know is that there are some issues that go along with creating these unions, and there's a lot of things that will trigger it. One of those things is position values within the world. One common thing that will cause that is if you have 3 decimal places in any of the positions, it does cause some issues. In this case, we don't. Um, so there could be other factors here that are causing it. My guess is it's probably going to be in this overlapping section here. Um, so I'm actually going to come in and deselect these two for now, and let's try our union. Sure enough, that worked. So now I'm going to select just one of the union, I'm sorry, one of the negated parts. Okay, so this is our problematic union. So now let's try to figure out what's causing our headache here. I'm going to, for right now, just go ahead and simplify the position a little bit. Let's see, we are sticking through completely. So there we are. So it was something with that position, and that, you can kind of play around with it and fine tune it. Um, but for some reason, the position value in this case was causing it to freak out a little bit. So just a little bit of trial and error, you can usually get that to resolve itself just by adjusting some things the way that we did here, and see what works. And in fact, what I'll do is actually decrease our snapping here, and let's try this now. There we are. So what we're left with here is a wedge with these shapes cut out, and I'm going to come in and say use part color and check that, and it's going to apply. Now you could imagine if if this were to be sized down and done a little bit better than what we did here. This is not really ideal, but you can make little cheese wedges and whatnot. This same concept here we could apply. In fact, let's go ahead and do that. Let's create a cylinder. Wrong handle. Let's scale it. Go back to our one stud. Let's make this one a little bit bigger. And I am going to make this deeper, actually. There we are. So I'm going to duplicate and scale this down, resize it up, and negate this, join it with this. Let's give this a cobblestone appearance here. Nice. Now I did forget my own trick here. We're going to back up, duplicate this, turn negate off, scale it down. Let's grab our watercolor and our 0.4. Now let's do our union and see how we look. There we are. And again, Can Collide is going to be turned off here. We're going to go back to our cobblestone appearance. Looking pretty good. Now I'm going to grab a block. We're going to go one by one. Move this on over like this. Now it's hanging off just a little bit. I don't really like that, so I'm going to fine-tune the position just a bit. But first, I'm going to duplicate and bring it over to the other side just so we have our part. And actually, now that I'm looking at it from this this camera angle, we are okay on the position, so I'm just going to leave that alone. Let's scale this up. Like so. Grab the other one here. Let's make this wood. We'll give it a brown color here. And now I'm going to duplicate again. Scale up. Bring it across like this. Just like that. And we have our studs here, so we can select these, bring up our surfaces, and let's make everything smooth. Okay. If you want to go for a little bit of added realism, which I think I'm going to do here, let's take this middle one, let's change it to a cylinder, and let's size this down. Let's go 0.5 and 0.5, and then I'm going to duplicate this, drag it out here like this, duplicate again. This, I'm going to make this 0.5, and let's make our other two values here 1 and 1. Actually need this a little bit bigger and a little thinner, I think. So let's go 0.25, and let's go 2 and 2. There we are. Duplicate one more time, and let's go now 0.5 and 0.5 and 0.5. I know I'm going a little bit fast, guys. Hope you're following along. But I think at this point, if you've watched my other videos, you should be able to keep up pretty well, or at least catch up. And a lot of this is just trial and error as you're building things, determining what feels best, what looks best. There we are. So now we've got a little hand crank here. Looking good. Let's duplicate this again. We're going to get a little creative with our center here. Let's increase these to 0.75 on our width. Okay. And scale it down. Let's get rid of our wood texture. For this case, you know, actually plastic is okay. I probably would have avoided that, but it'll work for right now. We can do burlap. Make a few duplicates here. Change my snapping to 0.25. Now what I'm going to do, now that I've got these spaced out, I'm going to select them individually. Like this. I'm going to leave the first one deselected. I'm going to uncheck move. I'm just going to nudge it over just a little bit. Now I'm going to deselect the first one, nudge it over a little bit again. Oops. Deselect, there we go. Come on. Just like that, so it's a little staggered. And then we can come in and just grab our rotate, uncheck that, and just give it a slight amount of rotation so it's a little bit random. And so we kind of give the appearance of a coiled rope. Again, this is a very, very basic setup here. I'm going to duplicate this piece on the end. Let's change this to a block. Actually, you know what? Let's keep it as a cylinder so we get the round sides, and let's just rotate it. I'm going to turn snapping back on for this. Let's rotate it this way. And we're going to bring our sides down to 0.25 width. Grab our scale tool and drag it on down like this. Now if you'd like, you can move this over like this so it's kind of coming off of that piece a little bit. Like that. And then we can grab our bucket over here. I'm going to change my snapping again. Grab our bucket, let's bring it on over. And again, this is where trial and error kind of comes into play. Since we have these grouped as a model, we can do uniform scaling like this. Okay, something kind of like that. So there we have it. And going and making some additional adjustments and things as you build is always a good idea. Just kind of take a look at it and you know, decide what the visual style of your game is going to be and whether or not you are keeping consistent with it. This is a pretty simplified approach. You could go for a lot more realism, or you could even tone this down even further and create a much lower poly version of it. It really depends on the visual style of your game and just you know, changing things around to adhere to that. But just to give you guys sort of an idea of some of the things that can be done with the solid modeling, and you know, some really simple ways to use it. Another thing that I want to show you real fast, if you remember from the ceiling fan tutorial, I had the base of a house built, and I actually used a similar technique for that. I'm just going to do some really raw values here just for demonstration purposes. I'm going to duplicate. Get rid of our overlap here. And duplicate this over here. Let's make this white, and let's give this wood planks. Yeah, sure, dark orange. There we are. Now, one thing that you can do here, if you really want to make some really simple, rooms and houses and stuff like that, you can use the same technique, do some really cool stuff with it. I'm going to duplicate one of the walls, grab my scale tool, size this down to about here, like this, just like that there. Now I'm going to duplicate this part. I'm going to negate it. And I'm going to go back to the other part that I had duplicated from. We're going to make this let's go fog. That's kind of cool. Transparency, we're going to do a 0.6. And then let's grab our wall and our negative part and union. So we now have a window cut out. You can do the same thing for doors, and you can get a little bit trickier with it as well. If I come in here, let's undo this. Let's grab our negative part here, duplicate it, move it over, and let's come down a little bit. I'm going to duplicate this, change it to a cylinder. And again, I know I'm moving very quickly here, but I hope at this point you're able to remember the previous concepts that I've gone through and keep up here. I'm going to bring this out so we can see it a little bit better. That actually works. We're going to negate. We're going to grab the wall. You know what, sorry. We're going to grab these negative parts first and duplicate those. Now, you'll see how I've got the cylinder sticking out. That is a really good trick to use when you're doing this. Oops. Remember to do it before you select negate. And the reason for that, they're just a lot easier to select. If you notice here, it's selecting the wall, kind of a headache. And in this case, they're very simple. So keep that in mind. I'm going to duplicate these, remove negation on the duplicate there. Oops. Go back to our fog, 0.6 transparency. Okay. Now I'm going to take the wall and the negative parts. I'm going to union them. Then I'm going to take these parts here. Now, because we have this overlap here, you can see it through the transparency, I'm going to union these. And you can see it gets rid of that. Now there is a little imperfection here, and that's just because I didn't go through the trouble of perfectly sizing these. It's very easy to fix. Just grab our scale tool here, 0.5, just making sure, and this was because we're moving so quickly through this, I didn't zoom in and take a look. But now when we union, so now that piece is going to be correct, so we can backtrack and know that we need to do the same thing for our cutaway here. Like this. So I'm going to grab the wall, I'm going to go through this again, union, and then grab these pieces, and keep in mind we did bring them out of the wall, so let's put them back in so it's the same width. Oops. Just like that there. So now we have a curved window as well. You can go in and add crossbars, whatever you need to do with it, really make this this look nice. Um, as an example here, let's bring this down. We're at 0.5, that's good. And we could even, if we wanted to, we could bring this down 0.25, do some nice things with it. So there's a lot that you can do to really spruce up the appearance of your builds. In fact, let's go this way. As you can see, it's very, very simple to do. And then you would just create a border, whatever you wanted to do with it. For that, as a matter of fact, one thing that I'll show you is a shortcut on that. Let's take our window union here. Let's duplicate it. And we're at 0.25. Let's scale this down. Actually, correction on that. Let's separate. Let's scale the individual sides down. The reason I'm doing it this way is because when we do scale down, it's going to do the uniform scaling on us, which is actually not desired because it's going to do the thickness of the glass as well, which we don't want. So let's union these pieces here. Let's grab our other union, duplicate this again. Now this one we're going to remove the transparency and we're going to change this to white. Where am I? Here it is. We're going to negate the inner one here and we're going to cut it out of the outer one. So now we've just used that same trick and created a frame. So these tools are very powerful and very easy to use. You can do a lot with them. And I really just wanted to highlight some of the things that you can do just to kind of give you some ideas and ways that you can incorporate this into your own games and your own builds. So with that, we are way over in time here, much longer than I wanted this to be, but I hope you've all followed along. You've learned a few things. We've got some ideas flowing, and I would love to see some of the things that you create from this. Please do me a favor and like this video if you enjoyed it. Drop some comments, share some feedback, pass along any images of any builds that you create from this. I would love to see them. And if you haven't already done so, be sure to subscribe because I've got a lot more coming. We're going to be getting into scripting very, very soon. And we're going to start doing some really cool stuff that I think you're going to enjoy. So until then, thanks so much for joining me, guys, and I will see you all next time.